to something that Lorene had mentioned when I asked, when is Ezekiel written for? And Lorene said, well, it's written for today. And, my thought was, okay, well, it's written for today. And for some reason, I'm thinking, well, it's written for the future. But she's exactly right. She's exactly right. And what we're going to talk about has a lot to do with that. 3 instances that we have to be aware of in the Torah and in the prophets that are hidden. And we don't see them unless we understand what's happening, what Yahusha made possible in Israel, the house of Israel and the house of Judah, and by proxy what happened when Yahusha made possible the ability for the atom to become whole again, complete again. Okay? We have an instance in Bereshit chapter 1 where it talks about the creation of Adam. It says he created, he, them, male and female, he created them. Okay, so we have an instance where he creates mankind. The second chapter of Bereshit, we actually get fragments from another source. Okay, we have a complete Torah from fragments of sources. It's a miracle that we have a complete Torah. Okay, the second aspect of creation in Bereshit 2:4 says, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth in when they were created, in the day that Elohim created the earth and the heavens. Okay, so he created something special on that day, that he created something that would contain both the earth and the heavens. And this is where he creates the little clay man, and he breathes into his nostrils the breath of life, and he becomes the atom. Okay, so we have a special creature planted in a special place to have access to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, specifically to have access to the knowledge of the tree of life, but we don't know. I always say to be spoon-fed little by little from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We can't, we teach our children a little at a time, because if we overwhelm them, they're not going to listen to us anyway. And that's exactly what happens. Ish and Isha eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, become overwhelmed, and they cease to listen to Elohim, and they are removed. But we have a special creation that was to minister to the people of the land. Okay? But that didn't take effect because of an inability or a lack of desire to listen. The result was a separation of the atom from Elohim. Okay? Now we have again in Shemot 19, if you will hear my voice and observe my covenant, I'll make you a special people, and you will be the Kohanim. You will go and you will minister to the people of the land. The people say, everything that Elohim has said, that we will do. But in the same breath, they tell Moses, we can't listen to this. You listen for us. And the result is that Israel, also, the ones that were supposed to minister to the people of the land, split. So we don't have anyone to minister to the people of the land. We talked about in our babblings of Paul, because yeah, all this stuff just blah, blah, blah. Okay, the idea of the inward man having to be connected and in unity, in agreement with the outward man. Okay, the members that cause the inward man, the balance, to fall apart are what we have to get under control. We're told in Romans that the Torah is a guide, and it tells us what it is to chatat, not to sin. Again, sin is an overrated word. Chatat means to stray off course. So it tells us that it's a physical thing that teaches us physically how to stay in alignment in the physical world. But then also in Romans it tells us that the Torah is spiritual, and thus it affects the inward man. The inward man rejoices at the Torah, but it's the members of the body that are freaked out, wigged out, and stressed out because they're constantly reminded that they are straying off course. When we come together as the complete Adam, we become the inward man where we're balanced. This is important because when we go to Ezekiel now, Ezekiel is the fulfillment of what Adam should have done to the people of the land. He was to minister to creation. He was to minister to the world, bring Elohim to the world, bring balance to the world, keep the world in balance. That didn't happen. Israel as a whole, the children of Israel, were to have brought balance to the world, keep the world in balance. It didn't happen. Okay? Yahusha came for us to be restored, to restore Israel back to Judah, to make it whole, to make the Adam, to restore the unity between the heavens and the earth back together, to make a whole Adam, so that we can have a prince to minister to the people of the land. So when I say that Lorena is very right in that it's a present thing, we have to stop, and this is something else that Trina mentioned the other day, that everybody wants to think about, well, I'm going to die and I'm going to go to some place and float around she listened to someone that was doing ministry, a family member, and the idea of, I have to die in order to have a relationship with my Elohim is a wrong relationship, is a wrong idea. I have to die in order to reach the kingdom of heaven is a wrong idea. I have to die in Christian terms to go to heaven is a wrong idea. I have a life in which I must seek to become Ha'adam. I have to seek to become the whole and the complete Adam. That is a very, very important concept that we're going to think about as we read through Devarim. But it's Parsha Devarim. Now this is last week's Torah portion. Va'et Hanan is this week's Torah portion. But this is so important we can't let it go, because some things that are said in this Torah portion, especially in the first verse, are critical to our understanding. So Parsha Devarim. It's called Shabbat Chozan. It's called the Shabbat of Vision. This Shabbat, I'm getting ahead of myself, but this Shabbat always comes before Tish B'Av. Tish B'Av, what happened on Tish B'Av? Destruction of the temple by the Babylonians. Then again on Tish B'Av, the exact same time, the exact same day, the destruction of the temple by the Romans. The next temple, everybody's getting so excited and giddy in Israel. Oh, they're building the third temple and they're getting all this stuff together. And did anybody read Ezekiel? Nobody builds that temple. Elohim provides that temple. Okay? Elohim provides that temple. Okay? And He provided us with our temple, and we can live in it now. We can rejoice in it now. We can minister to the people of the land now as the prince. Okay, the bigger picture, bigger story. But anyway, so in today's Torah portion, Moses begins to repeat the Torah to a new generation of the children of Israel that is preparing to enter the promised land. The unbelieving generation has died off. So we could consider this one of the reasons that we call this the Shabbat of Vision. In this we see a restored remnant preparing to enter into the 1,000-year reign under the direction of Yahushua HaMashiach, in which they will again undergo a short period of temptation after the Satan is allowed again into the Garden of Eden at the end of the 1,000 years, within the gates after a wicked world has finally died off. Okay, so we see this in a futuristic term. The evil generation has died off. Everyone that was in rebellion against Elohim has ceased to exist. Now they're going to cross over into the promised land. Okay? So, Revelation 22, 14, and 15, if you want to read that. So we can also look at it as our preparing to enter into another year of the service to Yahuwah Elohim. Every year represents a new promised land for us, a practice run before the real thing takes place. Where do we actually rejoice the fulfillment of the world to come? Where do we rehearse it? Because we get to rehearse it every year. In which festival? Sukkot. Sukkot. We have 8 days of Sukkot. The first day of Sukkot is the day that we enter in. The 8th day of Sukkot is called Hoshana Rabbah. The great redemption takes place. But we also have Simchat Torah. What do we do on the last day of Sukkot? We roll the Torah back. We go back to the beginning. In other words, the Adam becomes complete. Okay? So it's a practice. It's a dry run. Every year we get to practice. Every time before the feasts and festivals, we have other time. Every time before Sukkot, we have several feasts and festivals that prepare us for Sukkot, that prepare us mentally, beginning with Passover, where we decide whether we're going to or not, whether we're going to accept the bridegroom's proposal to start with. Then we go into Shavuot, where we make that choice. I'm going to listen for myself. I'm not going to depend on someone else. Everything that Yahuwah my Elohim has said, that I will do. As opposed to, listen, pastor, preacher, candlestick maker. You listen for me and tell me what it says, and I'll take your word for it. Who's ultimately responsible? This is a question that's going to tie in. It's very important to what we're going to consider. Who is ultimately responsible for your relationship with Yahuwah Elohim? You are, not me. I can stand up here and bump my gums and hopefully give you good information that you can take home, or you can argue, and hopefully you will argue, okay, because we don't learn if we don't get that thorns, okay? So Devarim now is going to be a retelling of the Torah, a re-education prior to the entering into the Promised Land, where the children of Israel are to follow the Torah and the directions of Yahuwah Elohim and destroy the pagan influence in and throughout the land. We read in Devarim, when you go in there, make sure that you assimilate to everything that's around there. Make sure that you follow along with every single group. And is that... It says go in there and destroy them all. Okay? There's no assimilation. All right? Destroy the pagan influences in and throughout the land. It will be their choice. It will be their choice to do so or not. And it's our choice to do so or not. In this, we also have a vision of the remnant ministering the Torah to a dying world during a period of tribulation, and an application of our entering into a new year of Torah study after Simchat Torah. We start over. We start looking at the Torah again. Are we going to read the exact same thing? Well, I'll tell you, if all we do is read it, yes, we're going to read the same stories over and over and over. Because that's all they're going to be, is stories. We're going to read them over and over and over. What do we have to do when we go back to Bereshis? Consume it. Digest it. Okay? This is going to play into this first verse that we're going to consider. Keep that in mind. Consuming the word of Elohim, but not just reading it, understanding what it says becomes a very important thing. Okay? This Torah portion is read every year on the Shabbat prior to Tish B'Av, the day in which the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. The second was destroyed by the Romans. But as for us today, it represents our opportunity to refresh our oath and our desire to keep Yahuwah's Torah as our continuing dedication to be able to cross over our spiritual Jordan. Those things that will drag us down and therefore away from our opportunity to enter into the millennium as a wicked generation begins its own self-destruction. Yardin, Jordan, means to drag down. Okay? When I cross over the Jordan, when I have faith in my Elohim, I cross over Yardin, I cross over the things that drag me down. I go to a place that he has told me to go in the Promised Land. All right? So this study is about rededication to seeking out and applying the truths of Yahuwah Elohim's instruction to us, his Torah. This Torah portion is from Devarim 1, now the whole Torah portion, okay, not what we're going to consider here. And don't freak out that it says that we're going to look at 1 through 20. We are going to look at 1 through 20, but we're not going to stop to investigate every single little word, okay? The whole Torah portion is from Devarim 1 through 322. Then I would encourage everyone to take time to read it. Devarim was the Torah portion, was that special scroll that was found, that was brought to the king. The king read it and said, oops. And as a result, it was taught kingdom-wide. Okay? So we're going to take a look at key points in chapter 1, verses 1 through 20 that we can apply to our lives today to truly cross over and not only find our way in the promised land, but to help others as well. We must know the Torah and be able to interpret its instruction accurately. There is a commandment in the Torah that says that a king must write out the words of Torah. He has to be able to write them out in order to absorb them. I don't know about y'all, but if I'm studying something, if I will write out notes, it sticks with me. Other than if I try to read it, I have to read it 14 times because I'm wondering if the squirrel got across the road okay, and what do they actually put in chicken nuggets, and all kinds of stuff. Okay? So, in order for us to understand it, we have to take time to study it. Okay? We all had the opportunity, or most of us had the opportunity to compile a Torah. Okay? But it's really something special when you go through that verse by verse and you're trying to figure out, is that really the word that belongs there? So we've learned in this class that just because it says it in English doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the Hebrew says. We found also in our studies that there's words in English that appear that don't appear in the Hebrew. There's words in English that are lacking that the Hebrew mentions that are there. We have to be able to really, really hunker down. So to get some clarity, let's consider what we're going to look at. We start with Devarim, Deuteronomy 1:1. Listen to what this says, especially this first phrase. These are the words which Moses spoke to all of the children of Israel on this side of the Jordan, in the wilderness, in the plain over against the Reed Sea, between Paran and Tophel and Laban and Hazarat and Disahah. Okay? So, what would a question that I ask often, what would one of the questions be that you would ask yourselves when you look at this verse? What do these names mean? What does this verse mean? But this verse should set a precedent for us to follow. Listen, it says, these are the words which Moshe spoke to all of Israel. First 4 books, who's the one that's been talking to Israel? Well, Moses has been talking to Israel, but he's just passing on the message directly from Elohim. In this case, Moses is now talking to Israel. Let's take a look at that, though. It says, the verse starts off with Ele Chadabarim Asher Debar, which is an interesting thing because it says Ele, which is a word for these, but Ele also means a specific kind. These specifically are Chadabarim, the proclamations, declarations, commandments, promises, as they are given by Moses. But it is a very interesting thing grammatically that it says Ele Hadebarim Asher Debar. It doesn't say Hadebarim Asher Emor. Okay? Emor would be the action of speaking, which Debar is, again, it's the content. Who speaks when we minister? Okay? I have the content. What we have to understand here is that Moses is the one teaching, but he contains within himself the content, the spirit that brings it forward. Okay? How do I know what to say when I need to say it? Okay? But anyway, let's go back. The first 4 books of the Torah verses begin by saying, and Yahuwah spoke to Moshe. here it's Moses that is speaking to all of Israel. What is this verse telling us other than simply that he spoke to them on this side of the Jordan, in the wilderness and the plain over against the Red Sea? These are things that we have to be aware of. What are the proclamations, declarations, commandments, and promises good for? What does Moses mean? Anybody remember? Huh? To draw from the water, to draw out. Okay, so something in there about the declarations, commandments, promises, warnings of our Elohim that we must be willing to draw out when we are on the wrong side of Yarden, when we're still stuck fearing the things that are going to drag us down because we want to get over into the promised land, and we are stuck in Arabah. We're stuck in the desert. This means we're stuck in a condition that is sterile. There's no growth. There's nothing that takes place. We're in Suf, opposite of where Devarim is given. Okay? Tophel means white, but Tophel also represents a quagmire, something that we get stuck in. When do we need Elohim? When do we need to draw on that word of our Elohim? We drag it. We draw out from the word when we're stuck in a quagmire, when we're stuck in a sterile position, when we're stuck in the desert, when we're stuck dreading the things that are going to drag us down, right? Okay? And then the Tophel, aside from quagmire, comes from Tophel. How do we get into a quagmire? Well, it's interesting that Tophel, the root Tophel, means foolishness. It means to whitewash. When do you whitewash something? When I want to cover something up. Okay? When do I commit foolishness? When I yield to something that's not necessarily true. What is the result? Because another thing that it means is something that is untempered. If I let my emotions go crazy, then I am yielding to shittim, which is the root of the word Satan. Shittim means something that is untempered, raw, unfiltered emotions. I have to have the gold that covers it, which is interesting because the next word is Laban, that comes from a root, bana, that means to be restored and established. In hasarot, something that hasarot means to encapsulate. It's the root of the word hazir that we kind of fudge a little bit and use hazir to say pig. Don't eat the pork because it's not good for you. Actually, don't eat the hazir. Don't eat the things that encapsulate tameh. Don't eat things that encapsulate a lack of ethics, morals. Don't eat things that encapsulate falsehood, foolishness. Because I need to be established in hasarot disachab. Disachab means gold. I have to be restored and established by consuming the things that encapsulate gold. The anointing of Yahuwah, that is what tempers me. That is what brings me back to a condition where I can cross over the Jordan and move on into the promised land, not worrying about that there's giants that make me look like a grasshopper that are going to crush me. Okay? This is why I have to be able to be spiritually connected to my Elohim so that I can draw from his proclamations, his declarations, his promises, his commandments. But if we look at this verse, what we need to take from this is that it's Moses that is speaking to the children of Israel at this point. Okay, so we're going to bring the submarine up. What we have to take away from this, Moses knew what the Torah said and was able to speak from it. This is why Pashat is so very important. What is Pashat? We have Pardes. Pashat is the surface level. It's the storyline. I have to know where these events are throughout the Torah so that I can go for it. Go to them so that I can draw out what I need. There are certain things that, if I want advice, there are certain things that Paul has to say in certain areas. Which epistle of Paul do I go to figure it out? There are certain parts in Proverbs or in Psalms that give me advice. Where do I go? I have to understand the Peshat. How do I get the Peshat? Well, I read the Bible. If I read it enough times, I'll remember where it's at, right? We can't truly deconstruct and dig for deeper meanings in the Torah if we don't know where to look for the topical verses to begin with. Therefore, remez, which is that slightly deeper level, Deresh, that deeper level than that, and Sod, that esoteric, metaphysical meaning, we can't obtain those without having a firm grip of the topical aspects of Peshat. So, Moses, in his travels, wrote out the entirety of the Torah. We get it in Devarim. It was not contained within the Ark. When we read about it, these scrolls were contained on the side of the Ark. None of us has access to the stone tablets. We do have access to over and over and over and over and over throughout generations.